Most firms still lack credible climate transition plans. Only 10% meet the 3A's ambition, action, accountability, and more than half don't report Scope 3 emissions, which often make up the largest part of the carbon footprint. To break this down, we are joined by Serena Mak from DBS Bank Hong Kong and Angus Choi from KPMG China. Now let's start with a quick context or background. Why are Scope 3 emissions considered essential to a company's sustainability strategy?
Scope 3 emissions are defined as all indirect greenhouse gas emissions that occur in the upstream and downstream along the value chain of an organization. That really include, for instance, upstream purchased goods and services, downstream transportation, distribution, waste generated in operation, business travel, and etc. It is crucial because the Scope 3 emissions is in fact a very significant portion of an organization carbon footprint. In our paper, use consumer goods related sectors as an example. We research around 50 listed companies in Hong Kong, and what we find is for the majority of them, over 70% of the total emission actually belongs to Scope 3. So why is it important? Mainly two reasons. Number one is compliance. So for all listed large cap listed company in Hong Kong, they will be mandated to disclose their Scope 3 emission in 2026. And for all the other companies, they are subject to similar disclosure in a comply or explain basis. The second reason is really strategically, if a company want to commit to carbon neutrality or net zero, they really need to know their baseline first before they can set meaningful target to decarbonize. Knowing a comprehensive baseline also help the companies to identify opportunities to reduce their carbon emission. Should these be reduced from the operation or somewhere in the supply chain?
Well, I think definitely further to Angus' point, indirect emissions also account for a large amount of bank or financial institutions' emission as well. Now, when we think about a corporate sustainability strategy, it is important to ensure that it embeds into the company's business and it creates long-term value and resilience. So when we look at measuring Scope 3 emissions, not only measuring it, but capturing optimization opportunities effectively will lead to things like route optimization, logistics optimization, which in fact is cost savings. And that could also potentially mitigate some of the risks, such as raising carbon tax in different jurisdictions. So in my opinion, definitely it is a very important part to make sure that companies do look at indirect emissions in their sustainability strategy.
Considering all these, what can business leaders do now to speed up their company's transition efforts?
I really can't stress enough how important it is for a what we call a sustainable transition. To be honest, the opposite of a sustainable or orderly transition is what really we call a disruption. And you don't need me to tell you how it likes during the pandemic or even in the most recent global chain event, how it likes when we have a global disruption in our supply chain market. So in a world which moving from a disorderly, if we have a disorderly transition from a fossil fuel reliance economy to a low carbon economy, it may look very similar. So for business leaders, in order to make sure we have a sustainable transition, I would recommend them to follow three major steps. Step number one is to establish a comprehensive carbon emission baseline, which we have covered in our earlier question. And step number two is to set a carbon reduction target based on science. And these targets need to be aligned with national decarbonization pathways, and sometimes even also need to consider regional or international sectoral framework. And step number three is really to embed all decarbonization actions into the company's business plan. That is what we call a creditable transition plan.
I think it is important to think about accelerating sustainable transition as a evolving journey. So process evolve, policies evolve, technologies evolve, and I think we've all witnessed all the disruptions that we have seen from the different waves of technology. Sustainability is no different. So in our report, we looked at disclosed green investment, and the top three categories were basically energy efficiency, renewable energy, or environmental protection initiatives. Now, these are all very commercialized and viable options that companies or business leaders can all adopt as low-hanging fruits. Now, of course, additionally, when we look at indirect emissions, different stakeholders such as the supply chain or the industry associations are all important stakeholders to make sure to be aligned with in order to achieve technological development or sustainable development together. Last but not the least, as we think about the capital investments, needs, etc., that will be generated as a result of these initiatives, now business leaders can definitely look at sustainable finance products from different financial institutions to help them to finance the needs.
Just taking a step back, because before a company gets to follow these recommendations, they need to develop a mature transition plan. With that, what does it take for a company to develop such plans aligned with the 3 A's?
The 3 A's actually stand for ambitions, actions, and accountability. And the 3 A's approach came from a disclosure framework called Transition Plan Taskforce. This framework sets out good practice for a robust and credible transition plan disclosure. And nowadays, actually, a lot of banks, they already have their own assessment tools to assess their customers' transition readiness. For those who are at the beginning stage of their transition journey, banks may provide advisory service to them. For those who are more mature in terms of their transition planning, banks can actually offer different types of green, sustainable, and even transition financial products. And many of these tools are actually based on the 3 A's approach as well.
You know, when we think about transition plans, it is important to think about this from two main perspectives. One is how practical it is, and the second thing is how achievable the plans really are to achieve net zero goals. So, of course, there are different kind of frameworks. For example, taking DB as an example, our transition assessment framework for our clients has 5 components: ambition, targets, disclosure, decarbonization strategy, and capital allocation. So effectively, what we're saying is that transition plans is not just a plan to show or demonstrate a climate commitment for the client, but it also helps to drive investment decisions. So the science and the capex should be aligned. Now, lastly, I think it is important to also remember that with all the things that are evolving around us, so is transition plan. So it should be a dynamic document that is revisited very frequently and ensure it's up to date and accelerated.
Thank you so much for your time today, Serena and Angus. Looking forward to having you both back on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you
you.
very much.
Once again, those were Serena Mack, Executive Director, Sustainable Finance Institutional Banking Group at DBS Bank Hong Kong Limited, and Angus Choi, Partner ESG Advisory at KPMG China. For more news, visit hongkongbusiness.hk.